I'm going to talk about the repressive states and new militant democracies, with particular reference to the case of Kashmir. And of course, this is going to be a short talk, but I would briefly touch upon what is repressiveness, India's transition from secularism to extremism, and when we talk about the case of Kashmir, briefly touch upon the genesis of the problem, what is the current situation, and finally, what is going to be the impact on the region and the world if this problem or this issue persists. Repressiveness, as defined by various dictionaries, is the subjugation of a people, a society, or a state. And this subjugation takes various forms. But let me first touch upon the tools of suppression which various regimes can apply. First is draconian laws, then stymied justice system, means people cannot hope to get a recourse from the judicial system. And then, of course, abduction or forced disappearances of the people. There are various tools also of high-tech repression. And high-tech repression consists of monitoring of people's conversation, spying on them, keeping a track of their movements, and even intervening or interfering in their private lives only to harass them later on or blackmail them with the aim of subjugation. And of course, last is brute force. It's self-explanatory. But the other aspect of my talk is what is a militant democracy? And by definition, it is a form of constitutional democracy authorized to protect civil and political freedom by preemptively restricting the exercise of such freedoms to the people. So that is what is a militant democracy. Now, what are the effects of repression? They are numerous, but worst of all is that humanity ceases to exist and the law of the jungle prevails. Now, let me talk about India's transition from secularism to extremism. By virtue of the Indian Constitution, India is supposed to be a secular state, and its founding fathers took pride on its secularism. People of the ilk of Gandhi, Nehru, Patel, and so on. They propagated to the world that they are secular, and perhaps in the initial stages they may have been sincere too. And that is how they managed to be amongst the founding fathers of the non-aligned movement and so on. But this secularism took a major beating, especially with the advent of the BJP regime. But let us not beat about the bush. Even in the days of the Congress, for example, it was the rule of Narasimha Rao when in 1992 the famous Babri Masjid or the Babri Mosque was not only desecrated, but it was razed to the ground under the false pretext that it was originally the site of a Ram Mandir or a temple of the Hindus dedicated to their god Ram. Now, when I talk about its transition, I must tell you that in 2014, when Narendra Modi fought the elections, he removed the cloak of secularism and he talked about Hindu supremacy, which in other words is Hindutva. I'll talk about Hindutva in a very short while. He gave to the ideas a revival of what Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, who in 1923 wrote his book Hindutva. And what is Hindutva according to him? It is Hinduness, a term which is meant to define Hindu identity. And Modi brought it to the fore. And once Hindutva comes to the fore, then secularism takes the back seat. Now, what is the aim of Hindutva, which was as perceived by Savarkar, which is being followed by his various disciples, and now the biggest of them, Narendra Modi? Now, this I'm quoting from the RSS website. Its aim is to establish a Hindu Rashtra. A Hindu Rashtra means a Hindu nation, devoid of other religions or forced into subjugation. So there you are. Secularism is dead, at least in India. And again, from the same website of the RSS, and the RSS is Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh, which is a militant organization even in the eyes of the CIA. And unfortunately, Narendra Modi is a self-confessed parcharak or activist of the RSS. And the mission of the RSS, according to their website, is expressed in the simplest terms. The ideal of the Sangh is to carry the nation to the pinnacle of glory through organizing the entire society and ensuring the protection of Hindu Dharma. And Dharma or Dharam means religion. Now, let me come to the case of Kashmir and how it relates to Hindutva. A brief genesis, as I had promised. The first Kashmir War took place just after the advent of the partition of India. August 14th and 15th are the dates when India and Pakistan became independent. Now, according to the Indian Act of Independence of 1947, which was approved by then the last Viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, it was agreed upon that India, which also comprised of a lot of princely states, the states will cease to be independent states. Instead, they will have the option to join either India or Pakistan. Now, there was a slight difference here that some states had a majority of either Hindu or Muslim population, but they had a ruler of a different religion. So, in all cases, it was the ruler of the state who was to decide who is going to join India or who is going to join Pakistan. But in the case where the religion of the subjects was different from the ruler, it was the people of that state who were to do so. And in this state of Kashmir, it had a majority Muslim population, but the ruler was Maharaja Hari Singh, who was a Dogra and a Hindu. Now, Indians knew very well the importance of Kashmir. First of all, there was a conspiracy that when the partition of India was to be carried out and the boundary line was to be drawn, Sir Cyril Radcliffe, who was the head of the Boundary Commission, he was coerced by Lord Mountbatten, the last Viceroy, to change the boundaries. Especially pertinent to Kashmir is the Indian state, or rather the Indian city of Gurdaspur, which happens to be in Punjab. And this was already decided upon that it was coming to Pakistan, but at the last minute, Sir Cyril Radcliffe changed it to go to India because this provided a land route to the Indians to reach Kashmir. Of course, there were various reasons why the Indians wanted Kashmir for themselves. One of them was that all the rivers which flow into Pakistan, except for the Indus, which comes from Arunachal, all the other rivers, they emanate from Kashmir. And India knew that at a later stage it will be able to shut off the spigots of water whenever it required to blackmail us. And the second region was that this particular place is very rich from the touristic point of view. And the third was an emotional one because Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru belonged to Kashmir and he felt it emotionally as a string of his ancestry that Kashmir must come to India. Of course, there's a conspiracy here, I don't want to go into that, but Sir Cyril Ratcliffe's private secretary, Mr. Richard Beaumont, he wrote down all these facts in his diary, and in 2004 his grandson published it as the Beaumont Papers, which narrate these events of how they were carried out. In fact, there are stories also of Nehru having carried out an affair with Lady Edwina, who was the wife of Lord Mountbatten, to force her, in other words, to make Lord Mountbatten cooperate in changing the Boundary Commission. Anyway, on the 27th of October, the Indians, instead of waiting for a letter of accession from either the Maharaja or the plebiscite that was to take place in the valley of Kashmir, the Indians landed their forces and forcefully occupied Kashmir, after which Pakistan felt the need to liberate Kashmir from the clutches of the Indians, and a number of volunteers from the frontier region, from Gilgit, Baltistan, and also some from the Pakistan army, they went to war. And by the time 1/3 was liberated, it was Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru who cried foul and went to the United Nations Security Council. And since then, a ceasefire was declared. But following that, the United Nations passed a number of resolutions. According to those resolutions, to which Mr. Nehru himself had agreed upon, it was decided that under the UN aegis, a plebiscite will be carried out and the people of Kashmir will decide for themselves whether they want to opt for India or Pakistan. Despite a number of promises by Nehru and even Mountbatten, a number of years passed, nothing happened. We had the battle, or rather the operations which led to 1965 war, the 1971 war, and nothing happened as far as Kashmir was concerned. In 1989, the people of Kashmir, they rose in revolt, but that revolt was crushed by brute force. Now let's fast forward and come to the fifth, or rather before that, let me tell you that in 1954, Article 370 and 35A, a presidential order was passed by virtue of which Kashmir was conferred upon the power to have a separate constitution, a state flag, and autonomy over the internal administration of the state. And since then, it continued. Although in 1989, when the people rose to get their freedom, they were subjected to brute force, but this arrangement continued. But Narendra Modi, in his second term, the moment he was re-elected this year in May, he decided that it was now time to shed away the cloak of deception, and again with another presidential order, Articles 370 and 35A were abrogated and Kashmir was annexed as a union territory. In fact, two territories were created. One was Kashmir and the other was Ladakh. And later on the 27th of October, a new map was issued, which it is so sad to say that the Indians declared that Azad Jammu Kashmir, which is administered by Pakistan, is also a part of the whole of state of Kashmir, which is now under the country, which is supposed to be, according to this map, by part of India, along with Gilgit and Baltistan, which is, according to the map, a part of Ladakh. Now, just after this revoking of the Indian articles of its constitution. There has been a lot of tension, but the worst thing is that Kashmir is in a state of lockdown. And this lockdown has continued for more than 100 days. And during this lockdown, also, the people are being subjected to different kinds of brutal acts, which includes searching of their homes, firing upon innocent people with pellet guns, and also looting and, I'm sorry to say, rape. Now, All Parties Hurriyat Conference has recently released a consolidated report on the atrocities carried out by the security forces in Indian Kashmir. And according to the report, Indian forces in their anti-freedom operation have massacred 95,238 Kashmiris, including 7,120 in custody since January 1989. But after August the 5th of this year, when they abrogated the special powers that were of autonomy given to Kashmir, more than 13,000 Kashmiris are reported to be incarcerated. Now, an alarming statistic in the same report which I just mentioned is that the troops molested 11,107 women. However, independent human rights activists claim that the figure is not even 10% of the actual number, because many women hide the fact that they were raped due to fear of being castigated by society. Very recently, a former Indian Army Major General S.P. Sinha called for the mass rape of Kashmiri women on Indian television. A short video from the news program floated on the internet and sparked fury on social media. S.P. Sinha is a serving BJP official who joined the party in 2013. His explosive comments of death for death and rape for rape unleashed an outrage on social media, with hundreds and thousands of social media users from across the globe reproached the Indian government as well as the Bharatiya Janata Party. Unfortunately, the prevalent regime in India, as I mentioned earlier, currently under the influence of Hindutva, takes its inspirations from the founding fathers of this heinous ideology which preaches hate, odium, and repression. V.D. Savarkar, who formulated the Hindutva philosophy in his book, 6 Glorious Epochs of Indian History, promotes using rape as a political weapon. Savarkar justifies the raping of Muslim women, rationalizing that not to do so when the occasion permits is not virtuous or chivalrous, but cowardly. And this is mentioned in chapter 8, titled Perverted Conception of Virtue. Not only that, extremist BJP leader Yogi Adityanath, the current chief minister of UP since 19th March 2017, delivered a speech saying that they should dig out the dead bodies of Muslim women and rape them. Can you think of anything more sick than this? Now let me very briefly talk about what are the possible impacts on the region if the same situation continues. Because Kashmir is an issue which is not an emotional one for Pakistan, or not just emotional one for Pakistan. The people of Pakistan believe that the Muslims of India are being subjugated to cruelty. And this is not true only for the Muslims, but all minorities are under threat. India has been carrying out false flag operations, and numerous false flags operations have come about. The latest one was at Pulwama on the 16th of February 2019, followed by a failed surgical strike on the 26th of February. But in retaliation, there was a riposte by Pakistan Air Force in which 2 Indian aircraft were shot down. Now, this is just an indication of what can happen. Now, what is possible is that the people of Pakistan, the people of Indian occupied Kashmir, and the Muslims prevalent elsewhere in India can take this matter very seriously, because their brothers and sisters in Kashmir are being subjugated, are being raped, are being killed, are being molested. And tomorrow, there are non-state actors who can arise and who can carry the torch of freedom and liberty, and in the name of jihad, they can carry out violent attacks, which can again lead to India to blame Pakistan and carry out an adventurism of the type that was carried out in the post-Pulwama at the place called Balakot. And what will happen is that it could initially be a limited war with conventional weapons. But please remember that India and Pakistan both are nuclear weapons equipped state. And one push comes to shove, there is no guarantee that the nuclear weapons will not be used. And if they are used, it is going to be a nuclear holocaust, not just for the region, but for the entire world. So the question arises, what needs to be done? So let me briefly talk about the way forward. The Kashmir problem will only get resolved when the international community decides to intervene in the matter, to put an end to the Indian state terrorism in occupied Kashmir, and implement the United Nations resolutions that are already in place. People like Donald Trump and of his ilk, other leaders, have tried to offer their services for mediation. But India remains obdurate and obstinate. But this will not last long. New Delhi is exploiting the international preoccupation with Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, and other hotspots by ruthlessly crushing the wave of freedom movements throughout India, and specifically in Jammu and Kashmir. But if the international community appoints an independent and unbiased fact-finding mission, India would be definitely exposed as one of the greatest exponents of state terrorism. That is all for today. Thank you.